So our case of our little friend Julie at Ariel High School presents a pretty interesting account of how we might look at decision making from the four different frames. I see all four frames very heavily represented. That's the genius of the book, I guess. It applies to most situations. So these helpful questions to guide our discussion. Yeah, I think the original policy was appropriate. The board themselves determined that it was appropriate because, for the most part, it worked. But there are exceptions to every rule, and they came upon this exception. From a structural point of view, you do want a policy that is predictable, that is reliable, and everyone, for the most part, can agree to it. And that's what happens at Ariel High School for the most part. But from a structural frame, it's about solving systems and being social architects. And so when something comes along, you need some flexibility within that structure, within that structural frame. And it seems that all the major players ultimately did provide or did have flexibility, which then goes into the human resource frame. The human resource frame within is probably going to be the one most appropriately applied to this argument that the mother makes about the ends don't justify, or sorry, the ends justify the means. And also the punishment does not match the crime. From a human resource perspective, that's true. It certainly is the case. And from a political point of view, depending on Julie's mother, she seems to be a political animal, and we might imagine that she very much is. This could be a big political brouhaha, but with that flexibility, they it seems they probably mitigated any political fallout. And symbolically, um, you know, the 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 policy initially is symbolically a very good one because symbolically it shows this, it promotes this myth that the school is a place for high standards and accountability, but with this exception that comes along, the myth is extenuated and said, or furthered to suggest that the school is also flexible and it has humanity. Um, so, was it appropriate for the principal to seek an alternative decision or disciplinary measure, rather? Yeah, it was appropriate uh, because, first of all, it shows his political astuteness, right? This could be this big political football or brouhaha, as I said, but he buys himself time. He or she buys himself time, kind of retreats a little bit from making an instantaneous decision, falls back on the superintendent, goes to the teachers. They've already made a big coalition, and very astute politically to do that. And again, symbolically, this is very good. It shows, they're not making rash decisions, that they have humane interests in mind. Again, from that human resource perspective. Um, so that was good. The student and her mother appear to believe the end justified the means. What does this raise about justice? So, with the question of justice, the thing that came to my mind was justice for at least 1,000, 2,000 years has wrestled with this element of the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. If someone is too far on the letter of the law side, and maybe has too rigid of a structural and top-down point of view, Julia, whatever her name was, is wrong and should be punished to the full extent of the law, because no one is above the law. That's going by the letter of the law. But the spirit of the law says, well, we have these policies to ensure ultimately student learning. They need to be in school. They can't be absent. But clearly, Julie is a good student. She's ranked, number 7 in her class. She's being deceitful, wrong. But why? It's not to hang out and do drugs and spray graffiti under the bridge. It's to further her education at the college. So they got a pretty good case there that the ends justify the means, and that there needs to be a balance between this letter and spirit of the law, and also the penalty fitting the crime. Ultimately, no one was hurt, aside from possibly, I think it was the assistant principal who ultimately had to, monitor her exams. So, that fit into his summer months, I guess. But so she was, I think it was very good for them. Again, the flexibility of the school to met out some punishment, but make it more fitting. Some other means, what other steps could have been taken to ensure a fair and effective outcome? Well, so this is pretty interesting, because after the fact, the school demonstrates a lot of flexibility, as I've said. And that flexibility is really touching on all 4 frames, as I think I previously I said my case on that part. But so after the fact, they are flexible. Well, if we rewind, and I think there's evidence to suggest that, number one, Julie and her mother may have had faith that the school would be flexible. And they could have not used deceit, but rather gone through the principal's door and said, hey, look, we got this exception. We got this situation. Could you make an exception? On their part. On the guidance counselor's part, he or she may have exercised some political judgment and said, well, this child is under my care. I know that she's a good student. She's number 7 in the class. And this is an exceptional case. I'm going to use my political savvy to march down to the principal's office and make my case. And maybe before I do that, I talk to a guidance counselor or 2 in my office and the head of the guidance and try to get them on board. And we can plead the case for the principal if we anticipate some obstinance there. Certainly, this could have been, hindsight is 2020. It could have been handled a little differently. Your last question here, the case reveals a flaw in the district's attendance policy. Again, it seems that the board, every level of command here, the board, the super, the principal, the guidance counselor, the teachers, all demonstrated some flexibility. And that was fair for everybody involved, it seems. So why not put that into place? Put that flexibility into place. Keep the attendance policy as is, because for the most part it works, but add a little clause that says at the discretion of the building principal or whoever it may be, and there may be some procedure, so that it's counterbalanced. There's a little check and balance there, but if they are willing to be flexible about the penalties, there could be flexibility about the attendance policy at the forefront. And I think I answered that other question too. And I'm at 10 minutes, so that was an interesting assignment. I hope I made myself relatively clear. thank you for the